Go.
Welcome back to the Convo Couch, everyone. Pasta Jardula here. Johnny Sue is still spinning on the ones and twos, but he's spinning at home in California. Well, we're here in Georgia. Boots on the ground. We got some great guests today. If you haven't checked out Fiorella's coverage from Peru, She was there for the election last night. A lot of stuff going on, a bunch of irregularities, but a lot of things we can also learn from elections, like to get in and out very mellifluous, very fluid. 5 minutes it takes to vote. Everybody needs an ID. That's in Peru. If we can do it there, we can do it here in the good US of A. My first witness, I should say, or guest today is a witness, actually. She signed an affidavit. We're here in Georgia. Please tell us your name and what your position was and what you did on election night.
My name's Bridget Thorne, and actually prior to the election, I helped as a temporary Dominion trained person in the warehouse 6 days leading up to the election. And then on election day, I'm a precinct manager and a poll tech. And I've been a precinct manager for almost 9 years.
Nice.
Until I was fired.
So you were just fired recently after this one? Were you fired because you opened your mouth?
Yes, I was fired because I testified at the Senate hearing. And I have witnesses, even though the director says he didn't listen to him, and that's not the reason. But I have witnesses that told me prior to my firing that I was going to be fired.
Yes, I remember. Did you, who else was at that? Was Javon Hutton Pulitzer at that Senate hearing, I believe, in Sioux? And that's kind of funny because I think you guys are in the same kind of genre. He talked about the internet being hooked up that day. And I really hope, I'm going to ask Garland later on, if you guys have filled that FOIA request to ask for the slug logs. I don't know if you did, but you got to get those. That's important. We want to make sure we know if the internet was hooked up or not. But now you work for Dominion. Tell us exactly what you did on election night or before election night, leading up to what happened and what made the red flags come out for you to open up your mouth and say, hey, something's going on here that's not right.
Well, I always try to work early voting, which is 100% employed by Happy Faces temp agency.
Okay. What is Happy Faces?
It's a temp employment agency.
So they hire the workers for the early voting.
For early voting, correct.
What positions do they hire? I mean,
all of them. 100% of early voting is run by these Happy Faces employees. Yet when I contact Happy Faces saying I'd be interested in working early voting, I have 9 years experience. I have a master's and undergrad degree from Georgia Tech. I've been a consultant. I'm a software technician. They ignore me. They don't call me back. And so I've been rather suspicious of Happy Faces, but I really wanted to learn the equipment better, and I wanted to be a poll tech. So my daughter and I both applied. My daughter was a senior at Georgia Tech in computer programming. And
now you both work in computer programming. Okay.
And she got a call back from not Happy Faces, but a contractor of Happy Faces.
Okay.
So I contacted the contractor directly and told them who I was, and they're like, "Oh, you'd be great."
Yeah.
And so through the contractor, I got hired to get the training with Dominion and to be a poll tech.
Question. So now it's early voting. You applied through Happy Faces. You said you were a little suspicious of them. Is it because you worked 9 years of elections before and they kind of said, well, maybe, I don't know why they said it, but maybe your thought is they said, wait, she's asking too many questions this one. She might be a little bit too much of an agitator. So let's just pass her and see if we can get somebody else. What's your suspicions?
Well, based on after working in the warehouse with Happy Faces employees, I feel like maybe they want people that don't know anything about elections. They want people that aren't trained, aren't qualified, and aren't educated. Do
you know what you just said there? I don't mean to interrupt you, but we've been saying this for how long? They break the system. They don't want a lot of people who know what's going on with elections. So please continue.
So I show up at this warehouse, and it turns out there's a huge group of people. A lot of them wearing their activist T-shirts, 100% minorities, that they started working the week before. So it turns out on October 16th, there was a COVID outbreak in the warehouse. So they had to quarantine the entire warehouse, all 24 employees. And the Secretary of State heard about this and said, hey, can we send in trained, qualified employees to help you with this debacle that you've had happen? And Fulton County Elections said, no, we don't need them. We're okay. So they hired Dominion to come in and run the warehouse. And then all the Happy Faces employees came to work the warehouse. And so I speculate after being there that these people weren't hard workers. They actually were avoiding work. A lot of them were on the loading dock smoking. You know, lunchtime would come and all these people would appear and you're like, where are they coming from? Because there's only like 20 people working. There's 60 people in line at lunch. So for me, I was just kind of puzzled, like, how did they get these people to work? Georgia Tech is 1 mile away from the warehouse. And there's a gazillion students that would work for $30 an hour in this warehouse in their off time.
I just want to stop there 1 second, because I've seen this before, especially when in California, we saw people counting provisional ballots. It didn't seem like the people were emotionally invested in the elections.
Correct.
They didn't have the integrity and the want to know what goes on. It feels like they were just punching the clock. Yeah, what do I got to do? Get through with it, whatnot. And when it comes to our elections, it's the most important thing to some of us. We could find a ton of people out there who have some skin in the game.
Yeah, that's what the Secretary of State's auditor said, that they use these happy faces employees way too much, that don't care, they're unqualified, they're poorly trained, honestly don't care about the elections, that you need stakeholders in your community running your elections.
How do we find stakeholders? What's your thought process? You must have thought about how do we get really people who are involved without being politically partisan on one side, that are just like, hey man, I can care about elections.
Well, step one, in that warehouse, they have 255 poll managers, 510 assistant managers, and a plethora of poll workers. Send an email to them first. One, it would give them better training on the machines. They'll know how the machines work more on the inside. They'll understand all the security label, the forms, everything you get in the precinct.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be more in tune with the equipment. And instead, you have these happy faces employees that you're having to train, who could care less, who are avoiding work, and they're going to work this election, and then the next one they're going to be gone.
That's it.
They're not coming back.
They're recycling. They're not even recycling the same people. They're just the same mentality of people. Just coming again. And I saw this in California, and it was really disturbing. I'm like, these people don't care about elections.
And when I was getting my poll worker training, they had a guy come in. He's one of the head trainers for Fulton County to train us on using this app on an iPad.
Mm-hmm. And this is to get people signed in?
No, this is just to,
when they come to vote?
It's, as a poll tech, it's just an app to report problems.
Okay.
If you have issues.
So let me make this clear. So you didn't train for, like, your poll worker is different than like oh, you're coming here to vote. You're looking for issues and problems and stuff, because you're a different sector of. I do both. Okay.
I do both. So I was being trained as a poll tech, so I could submit issues with the equipment.
Yes.
But the problem, I asked this instructor, I'm like, well, how can you have people on poll techs interacting with voters? Because you're supposed to be from your county if you're working with a voter. And he said that Fulton County circumvents that law by contracting out happy faces employees. So then they don't have to have people that live in the county working with the voters. And so then everybody I met, it just started making sense. Everybody I met was from outside Fulton County.
Yeah.
You know, my manager, who maybe graduated from high school, was very disorganized. We would lose test ballots in the warehouse. She was from Douglas County. It's over an hour away.
Yeah.
From Fulton County.
So what the major issue with that is, once again, not invested interest in making sure that their election is secure and safe. But yet the state or the county kind of sells it as like, well, we got to make sure it's not anybody who's going to want to cheat because they're from a different county now. So even though they don't care about elections, it's better for security. Is that how they're selling it off?
No, they're not even selling it. They're trying to hide that I listened to Fulton County commissioners meetings, and they're like, oh, well, we use happy faces employees, but 80 to 87% of them are all from Fulton County. Well,
which is a lie.
A lie, because the temp agency is not even in our county. It's in Tucker, Georgia. You know, and I believe they're screening employees to make sure that they get clueless employees. And I always used to think Fulton County was just inept, and I'd want to try to help them, and I'd send in recommendations and I'd write things, because there are a lot of simple fixes.
Mm-hmm.
And after my experience at the warehouse, it almost seemed everything was intentional.
Yeah.
That we intentionally want these sloppy workers.
Yeah.
For instance, on the Friday, October 30th, before the election, early voting closed at State Farm Arena. They had 40,000 ballots and like 40 tabulators come into the warehouse. And it was just a free for all. Anybody want to take ballots out here? Grab a tabulator, dump out the ballots into these luggage carriers.
Yeah.
And as a poll text came to me to alert me of the issue, and I was like, oh my gosh. And as a poll manager, I went over to watch. And I'm like, there was no 2 people emptying the tabulators. There's no managers around.
Okay. So you're talking about the tabulation machines.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking there was individuals emptying them out, not with 2 people at one time?
Yeah. It was just grab one, and you could wheel that tabulator anywhere you wanted to empty it.
Really?
Yeah. And
so I can go take it back into Garland's room, empty it out, let me get rid of some of these Trump ballots and make a Biden, or Biden vice versa if I wanted to right now.
They were just emptying these ballots out. So I went over to question the person in charge, this Tia, and she yelled at me. And she's like, we've been doing this all week. There's nothing wrong with this. And I'm like, well, you should be, the people emptying and touching these ballots should be under oath. There should be 2 people.
Absolutely.
These suitcases, they would leave them unattended. They need to be secured with seals.
Yeah.
There was just none of that. They were just treating it like it was just ordinary paper, not ballots.
So you have all this incompetence because people are hired who are meant to be hired because they don't really care. They don't even know. Therefore, then this county and the state, in your opinion, can then say, correct me if I'm wrong, they can claim incompetence rather than fraud.
Right.
That's the main thing. I see this in Maricopa right now. It's like they're going to claim incompetence because incompetence isn't fraud. So they get away with it and go, oh, my bad. Same thing here. We saw this in California 2016. We saw it in 2020. We saw when people were getting checked in, you had older people, no offense to anybody, were trying to use the iPad to get somebody signed in, and they really never used an iPad. And then you had 2 young kids who were probably born with an iPad in their hands trying to answer questions about elections. He didn't, never worked an election before. I was like, aces in places, swap that, but it seems like for design.
Right.
So now we have early voting, right? How long is the early voting period?
It's 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Wow, that's just ridiculous. Whew, more time to really screw up an election. We have early voting, a lot of incompetence, no chain of custody. It's just a crap show. I'm not going to use the S word and stuff. And you see things going on that really just avoid the chain of custody. They look awful. You try to report it and say, hey, this is no bueno. And they say, hey, mind your business, lady. We know what we're doing over here.
Oh, and then NPR, Wade, the NPR arm of Atlanta, publishes an article glorifying these poor election workers, these poor happy faces workers. And they talk about Tia, the one who was emptying the ballots, that she was a former airport bartender who just got called in and she knew nothing about what she was doing, yet she was in charge of testing and setting up 255 precincts, and she was in charge of securing the ballots from State Farm Arena.
They have no experience. They shouldn't be working these elections. This is just totally ridiculous. Who hires happy faces? Is that the choice of the board, or does the Secretary of State? Okay, but the Secretary of State has to sign off on it.
Well, it's an approved state contractor.
Okay.
So the state is approved of them but Happy Faces works other parts of the county, and I'm sure they might do a better job, better than elections. But right now, Fulton County has tried to renew the contract for this coming.
They're trying to bring Happy Faces back?
Mm-hmm. They've gotten not approved the past 2 meetings that they've had. They get one more try and then they'll be out.
Can I ask you a question? Mm-hmm. You've been doing elections for a while. These are publicly funded elections. Why do we have to hire contractors out instead of hiring election integrity people who know what's going on and have them hire staff? Why are they so quick to go to Happy Faces? Do you honestly believe it's because it's just the ignorance thing? Is there a loophole financially? Is there something where
it costs more.
It costs more money
having a temp agency do it. I think it also costs time. I think it's hard to staff it. For me to staff my precinct that I run on election day, you have people last minute, I'm not gonna be able to work, and you're trying to find somebody and they got to get training. But you have a higher quality person that's working. I think
More integrity.
You know, they want to do what's right.
Yes.
They're not going to cheat their neighbors.
Yes.
You know, they have, and they don't want any appearance of it. They want to make sure that everything appears on the up and up.
Yes.
And on an outward level. And I don't screen, you know, oh, you're a Republican, you're a Democrat. I don't know who I hire. I just hire people to work my precinct.
We said earlier, it's not even a bipartisan issue. It's a nonpartisan issue. It's very important stuff. All right. So now you go over to Tia, you tell her what's up. She tells you, go take a walk, and you probably bite your tongue, but keep your eyes open and what's going on. Continue to go tell us what happens.
I left that night at 10 o'clock at night, and I'm walking through rows of cabinets because our BMDs are putting cabinets in their
ballot marking devices.
And so I'm walking through a row to go out a side door, and I see like by itself a tabulator, a chair, and an open case with ballots in it. And it's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like, oh my God.
It's not secure.
It's not secure.
Everything's supposed to be secured at 10 o'clock, everything, boom, locked up, right?
Yeah.
But it's not.
And I leave at 10, and then come to find out the next morning when I come back at 8, like I'm supposed to.
Don't tell me
a lot of these no, all the suitcases were there, and they all had yellow seals on them.
Okay.
Which I'm like, okay, at least they're sealed. But I'm thinking, this building isn't secure. Anybody could walk in here. There's a loading dock. Anybody could grab suitcases of ballots.
There wasn't cameras on the place the whole time? Not online where you can look and stuff?
No.
Not like the Arizona audit where everything is like, you can't go to the bathroom, and they're like, okay.
They didn't have poll watchers in there at all. Poll watchers weren't notified that they were testing and setting up.
Security. What about security? Big security guy named LaForge with dogs?
No.
All right.
I mean, there was a police in that building. The Georgia World Congress Center is huge. So when you enter the building, there's a police station there. And you just say, hey, I'm with the elections, and they buzz you and let you in. And then you have to walk like a quarter mile to get literally.
Do they have a list before they know you go in? Because when I tried to go to the Arizona Maricopa County audit, there was rangers there, and they wouldn't let me go up past one point. It was like security was high. You're telling me it's just, hey, Bob, buzz you in and you go.
Correct. And even on the loading dock, I had my husband bring me something. So I just went out on the loading dock.
And he grabbed it.
And to meet him, I dropped a pin so he knew where to meet me. And he could just drive right up. He could have driven in the building if he wanted to. There's nobody stopping.
So no security, no chain of custody, just
ballots there.
Ballots, whatnot, things not locked up in ballot marking devices with cases where no chain of custody, it's all over the place.
And then at my job, I was in the middle of the warehouse, and we had 6 ballot marking devices with poll pads. And my job was to create test ballots. So
for what purpose do they create test ballots?
So you have to make sure you can vote for everything on a ballot.
Yeah.
And so we had 21 senators in one race. So there were 20 people running and 1 write-in. So we had to create 21 ballots for every single precinct. And then they would put them through the tabulator scanners to make sure that you could vote for everything. There wasn't an error.
Okay.
And so that was my job, but I realized there's ballots everywhere because they kept losing them.
They kept losing ballots. Is this what you testified to or no? All right.
So we would have to reprint ballots, another set of 21.
But those ballots that you said kept getting lost can eventually be turned in if they got a hold of them.
Yeah, they looked identical, or they could be switched out ballots.
Okay.
With cases that are unattended and unsecured.
And this is what you testified right here specifically. So you were losing test ballots. How many test ballots did you guys lose?
You know, I don't know exactly the number, and I don't know what happened to the test ballots after we used them, because we had a case in the middle of the room where if you wanted to throw something away, it would go to a shredder. But it was just an open suitcase in the middle of the room. And so if I made a mistake on something before I put it in there, I would mark through my ballot because I didn't want it to be reused. And I realized that wasn't the protocol, and there were all these ballots around. So I took out all the ballots that I could find one day in that case, and I came out with a stack that was 8 inches tall. So during the day.
Wait a second. I want to understand this. I'm so sorry before. So you're saying there's a bin where they throw everything away?
They're shredded.
They're supposed to be shredded. But you went into that bin before anything was shredded, and you picked out a stack this big of empty ballots that weren't marked.
They were marked.
They were marked.
Mm-hmm. I imagine they were test ballots. So I destroyed them throughout the day. My daughter and I, we started marking
to make sure they weren't used again.
Yeah, we just want to make sure they weren't used again. But the thing that really disturbed me was on my last night there. I'm supposed to stay till 10 o'clock, but it's our last night. So the precincts, actually all the machines should have been tested and sent to all the precincts.
Yeah.
Before then, but they weren't. But everyone's wrapping up. We only have 3 or 4 precincts left. And I'm sticking around because in case they lose the test ballots, I would be there to print ballots. So I'm the only one at the test ballot station. And my manager's sitting 20 feet away from me. And I got kind of bored. So I decided I'll go help somebody. So I leave the station. I'm helping this person set up a rather large precinct. I actually run a test ballot test on the tabulators. And I flipped through it and I realized, oh shoot, I printed 2 Kelly Loefflers. But I didn't feel like going back to the test ballot station and printing another one. So I just went ahead and ran it anyway. I took out the card, took it to the Dominion desk, and it passed. I was like, okay, what kind of tests are these? Like, what are they? What are they? I mean, I'm told what they're testing for, but that test shouldn't have passed. And it did. But I went ahead and put it back in, zeroed it out, went back to get my purse because it's late. It's after 10. And there's a Dominion employee, the head one, and this guy from the elections group, Mike Prendergast, printing ballots. And
what were they? Did you ask them, what are you doing?
I said, did you guys lose test ballots or something? And, because that's the only reason for the stations is to print test ballots.
Yeah.
And the Dominion guy looks at me like, yeah. And I'm like, well, let me help you then. So I sit down and I'm like, okay, what precinct are you doing? So I'll start from the bottom because I'll go number 21 up.
Yeah.
If the guy on the other end's going from the top, 1 through 10. And so Dominique tells me the precinct. I start printing them. And then Dominique's like, I got to leave. And so then I look at the guy at the end and I'm thinking we should be meeting sometime. But I notice he's printing random ballots. He's not printing test ballots. Because you get to a point after your 5th ballot where on the poll pad, you just turn it in, you press 1, and then you press print. And he's going through the whole ballot, multiple pages of the ballot and printing print. So I go over and instruct him like, don't you know how to print test ballots? And I'm like, you're not doing it right. And so I teach him how to print test ballots. And his remark to me is, oh, do I have to vote for Trump? Because on the first test ballot, you have to vote for Trump. And I joked and laughed and said, yeah, you have to vote for Trump. And then, so he started printing his test ballots. But then he's like, oh, I got to leave. I can't stay. So he left. And I took all his ballots on his printer and I just ripped them up and put them in the shredder bin.
To make sure they weren't processed through and used.
They weren't going to be used. And I did a whole set of test ballots. And I took them to Dominique. And I'm like, this is weird because there's really no precincts running tests. Everyone's pretty much done.
Yeah.
And before I left the floor, I made sure no one needed help with anything. So I had a 40-minute drive home and I'm just like, okay, something's not right. They clearly weren't printing test ballots. Dominique is the head Dominion guy. He trains everybody.
Yeah.
How could a guy next to him be helping him and not be doing it right?
Yeah.
So things just didn't add up. And I had this just sick feeling in my stomach that, something's not right. I need to tell somebody, but who do I tell? Richard Barron, the director of Fulton County Elections, was periodically in the warehouse. He would set up and sit at the back table. I'm like, I can't say anything because he must be in on it because he's witnessed all this. He had meetings with these people on the back table back there. I also found out on Sunday that the ACLU was going to be in every single precinct to process absentee ballots to clear voters. And I went back and asked Richard Barron, why is the ACLU going to be in every precinct? And his response was to me, who told you that? And I'm like, my supervisor just sent me an email.
Yeah.
and Cynthia, and he's like, oh, she shouldn't have said that. She should have just said absentee clerk when you put in every precinct. And so my thought was, okay, he doesn't understand why I'm concerned, and so we'll just drop the conversation right here. And I just had this horrible feeling, and I hated to accuse anybody of fraud, or wrongdoing, but I could not say anything. So I remembered after the June election that an investigator had reached out to me, because our June election was a complete fiasco.
Who ran in June?
That was just our primary election.
Okay.
And it was the first time we used the machines. That's where you had the lines that were 7 hours long.
Yeah, okay.
People who didn't know the equipment. They were screaming voter suppression.
Yeah.
So
well, I mean, but if you hire happy faces and all these groups that don't know how to really, that's a job I always say I want, because I'm in the restaurant business and I used to go open up restaurants. So I always believe that I can make it very fluid and get people in and out and have your races in your right places. And I believe that voting should be an easy thing, just like in Peru, 5 minutes to get in and out. That's Peru.
Right.
We, United States, we can't do it. We have to claim ignorance and stupidity and what?
Well, even in my precinct in June, they forgot to send me 2 pigtails to plug in 8 of my 10 ballot marking devices. And I went to them the night before and told them, and they told me, well, check the back of the cabinet, and if they're not there, we'll run it on battery and we'll get some to you. So sure enough, the next morning I go in and I don't have them in the back of the cabinet. I call, say, can you bring me 2 pigtails?
And that's so they can plug in there.
So I can plug them in. So I run them on battery. At 9:30, my machines start beeping because they're running out of battery. I call and they say, oh, you just need to check the back of the cabinet. And I'm like, I did. So make a long story short, I only had 2 of my 10 BMDs for that election.
Yeah.
Running. It took them till almost 1 in the afternoon to get me my pigtails to plug in my machines.
Yeah.
But my lines are never longer than 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So these 7-hour lines, I'm like, what did these people do? Like, how did they mess up that bad? It's just amazing.
It's either fraud or ignorance, and you should get fired for either one of them, especially when it comes to our elections. I want to talk about the test ballot real quick. So you talk about a test ballot, it's already marked with the ballot marking device. Is that how does a test ballot look?
So they look like any live ballot that you would get off of off the ballot marking device. It has the QR code. We would call up the precinct to get the ballot up. We would create cards, and then we would vote. And the first ballot, you vote for the first person or first thing, all the way across. Yeah. And then the second, all the way across. Then the third. So we got all 21 selections.
So you're pretty much just testing to make sure each person, it works for each. But if you wanted to be nefarious or sinister, I don't know which word you want to use, you can just mark one person all the time and then re-put those in to be counted into the tabulation machines, right? So the test ballot is coming off a ballot marking device pretty much. And then you're not testing tabulation, that's done somewhere else, right?
No, then once you finish your test ballots, then it goes to that precinct. And then the technicians that are setting up that precinct run those ballots through their tabulator
to make sure
that the tabulator can read every single candidate. And that's what I did that last night.
Yes.
And I ran a faulty test and it still passed.
So that's crazy.
The thing that my concern was, these ballot marking devices were in the warehouse. I would leave at 10 o'clock, but these other people would stay till 2 a.m. And anybody had access to those machines. And then the fact to find people printing ballots after they thought I left that on Sunday night, it just causes me to wonder. And then you have ballots from Phillips Arena in the warehouse, unsecured. You have ballots in boxes coming out from underneath skirted tables. They're not
even allowed to be, like, people go, oh, that's okay, they just forgot about them. Like, no, they're not allowed to be under a skirted table. That's illegal. They got to be in eyesight, as there is people, they don't care about the chain of custody until they care about the chain of custody, like in Maricopa. Now all of a sudden they do, Kate. So you testified pretty much that you saw all this irregularities, lack of chain of custody, people in there printing with no security after the whole test ballot debacle from a guy who's running the whole thing.
Right.
Well, let's be honest, he knows how to use the machine and play dumb and whatnot.
He's
and
the
stuff,
head Dominion guy.
I mean, come on. How do you use the machine? So you testified to all this, and where are we at right now?
Well, and then
when did I miss something?
Yeah, on election day, I was a poll manager.
Okay.
And they put emergency ballots in every precinct just in case you lose power, you can't get in the building.
Are they like provisionals?
They're identical to absentee ballots.
Okay.
So they're called absentee/provisional/emergency ballots. So they have three purposes.
Yeah.
So they're identical to a pristine absentee.
Are they
ballot.
pink?
They're identical to an absentee ballot.
Okay.
They're
So our provisional ballots are pink, but our absentee are a little bit different. Okay. So these are three. Okay. All right. Emergency ballots. Please
they can
continue.
be used for all three. So I'm a split precinct, and someone, my 400 ballots were missing.
Okay. Yeah, you told me about this.
So someone substituted 400 yellow photocopied sample ballots, and they put a purple cover sheet with my precinct and 400 in a rubber band, and thought that would pass. And so I had my normal ballots, had like 50 for my other smaller precinct. So I could use those for provisional if I needed to, or emergency. And so I sent a poll clerk down to the warehouse on election day and said, hey, can you find my ballots for me?
So they were at your precinct and then they disappeared, you said, or?
No, they never made it.
They never made it there, but you were waiting. All right. So you have a allotment of 400 ballots you're waiting for. And you're like, okay, where are my ballots? Each precinct has a certain amount.
Right.
You're due for 400. And yet you don't know where they're at. You send somebody to go get them and nobody knows where they're at.
Well, they gave me those yellow sample ballots.
Yeah.
And I guess they thought maybe because of Happy Faces temp that would pass muster.
Hold on a second.
But it didn't pass muster. I sent someone down, and I have my text messages to verify. I took a picture of what I had.
Yeah.
And tell them this isn't right. And they're like, yeah, it's not right, but we don't know where they are.
Okay.
And then I called a neighboring precinct, and they were missing theirs as well.
So a bunch of people were missing a bunch of.
I assume. I mean, I didn't go around. I didn't have numbers.
But you found two places and whatnot that were missing the ballots. So about almost 1,000 ballots, 400, 500. Okay.
Yeah.
And that was on election day. So you had all these things that happened through the course of the time. And you just said to yourself, this was a sham election. It's terrible. What's the process now?
So for me, I thought, the paper ballot's just a backup ballot anyway. Yeah. So maybe it doesn't really matter. That's how I kind of comforted myself. But I told the Secretary of State investigator, I talked to him prior to the election and then the day after the election to tell him, look, you need to look into this. And this is what happened after the election. And I kind of felt a sense of relief. I told somebody they'll do the right thing. They'll look into it for me. I don't hear a word. And then they start counting the paper ballots in the hand count. I'm like, oh shoot, the paper ballots weren't secured. So then I fire off more emails. And nobody listens. And then I talked to another poll tech that was in there with me. And that's when I realized that Dominion was running the entire warehouse. So even though Richard Barron was in there, there was probably no other Fulton County election officials that were in there. So I decided I will send an email to my supervisor and her 3 immediate supervisors.
Yeah.
To tell them, look, you guys need to fix this because you have an election in January. So whatever's going on, something is not right going on. You need to secure those test ballot marking stations. You need to make sure people can't print ballots. You need to secure the blank absentee ballots that are sent to every precinct. And my supervisor immediately responded. She's a very sweet lady and said, I'm going to send it to all my managers.
Yeah.
So she sent it to one additional person that I didn't have on there. And then I don't get any response. It's crickets. And so then 5 days later, I reach back out and I'm like, are my concerns not really a concern? Are you guys okay? Or what's going on? And I got a response from Dwight Brower.
Who is?
He's the elections director. So he's right under the supervisor.
Gotcha.
Richard Barron. And he told me that they're just way too busy right now. They just don't have time to deal with this. And I'm like, okay, that wasn't a good answer. So anyway, I thought, I'm going to go to the State Board of Elections meeting and make a public comment and get people to know and the public to know. So I go on the State Board of Elections meeting. I'm getting ready to board a flight to Salt Lake City. So I went through security, but I didn't want to go on the train because I was afraid I'd lose them. So I just sat there in security waiting for my name to be called. And I finally get called on the meeting. And I start talking about how I was a poll tech and Dominion was running the warehouse. And then I get muted. And
that's been a common thing this whole coronavirus time. They've been muting stuff.
So in the meeting, my name is on the screen, and then I get muted, and Ryan Germany, the Secretary of State's lawyer's name, gets put up on the screen. And then you hear him go, next.
Really?
And then they go on to the next person. So I board my 4-hour flight to Salt Lake City. I land, I get on my phone, and my phone's blowing up with LinkedIn, Instagram messages from people all over the world, even like Germany.
Really?
Are you the poll tech who got muted?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh shoot, I didn't really want to go public.
Yeah.
I'm just
too late now.
I'm trying to go, kind of proper channels and everything. So after I got muted, I wanted to enjoy my Thanksgiving, so I didn't really reply back to many people, except for one reporter. And I told her I'm trying to lay low and go through the proper channels. Can she just hold on and I'll talk to her later?
Yeah.
And because I want things, my goal is to get things fixed. My goal isn't to like, oh look, it's all fraud. Trump won that was not my intent. I complained before the election, so it didn't matter who won. Biden could have won. Trump could have won. I was going to be complaining about how the election was run.
Yeah. But for the record, you are conservative and whatnot, but still yet, once again, we talked about this being nonpartisan. I'm sure if the elections were fair, or we saw chain of custody, a proper election, you would accept the results. But the fact is, we saw a cluster mess.
Mm-hmm.
We saw all these things we talked about, and now it's very, very suspicious. In other words, you don't necessarily have the smoking gun, because a lot of people go, "Whoa, where's the smoking gun in the elections?" It's like, listen, we can never provide the smoking gun because we really don't get audits. But there are so many irregularities. You just told me lack of chain of custody, being able to print multiple ballots, because this particular election, the Democrats like to say there are more people who voted in this election than any election ever. It's like, I don't know if that's true, but I know we have a hell of a lot more ballots out there.
Yes.
And so what you saw were irregularities for those ballots, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So eventually the Trump lawyers contacted me, and I just told them, they're willing to listen. They'll listen to me. And so I told them everything. And then they asked if I would testify at this hearing.
At the Senate hearing.
At the Senate hearing. And I kind of, right up to the very moment before I was driving down there, I was debating if I should do it or not.
Yeah. Why were you thinking maybe I shouldn't do it? At this point, you've gone so far. You've been muted. You've seen things. People have ignored it. What gave you second thoughts?
Well, I just didn't want to be seen as a highly partisan person, I guess.
Yeah.
Because really, I'm for election integrity, no matter who wins or loses. And I've always been that way. I've always spoken out to Fulton County elections if I saw something that was wrong. And that was my purpose. And I wanted to get it fixed before January. And I had a doctor's appointment. The hearing started at 1. I had a doctor's appointment at 1:30. It's the end of the year. I'm like, well, I'm going to go to my doctor's appointment, and because I won't get in if I don't go to it.
Yeah.
And so I'm at my doctor's appointment, and they're calling me. Can you come down? Can you come down?
Garland, so sorry. You can pick it up.
So I end up.
So you're on your way. You're thinking about going. You're questioning maybe not going.
Yeah, I end up deciding, okay, I'm going to go ahead and go down.
Yeah.
And I really didn't realize the magnitude of what I was doing.
Yeah.
I got there, and right away, I think Susie testified right before me.
Yeah.
And they told me I had, 15, 20 minutes. And then all of a sudden they're like, nope, you're next.
That's it.
Take your coat, take my purse, and go on in. And I wasn't prepared. I thought I would just read the thing that I sent in. Well, it turns out they give it to all the senators, and then you're supposed to just talk. And I was not prepared at all. And then I left, and I immediately was getting pulled to do live interviews, and I was so flustered. I didn't really know how to react or respond. And Hannity's show was calling me, "Can you go on Hannity tonight?" And I'm like, "No, I don't think so."
Yeah.
Because I truly want things to be fixed, and I don't want it to appear that, oh, I'm just in here to talk. Go on
Well,
Hannity's show,
let's talk a little
like
bit more about that. Okay, so now you obviously people, oh, she's just a Trump or she's just a
Yeah.
conservative. They hate Biden. They're saying this stuff. You've been an election official for 9 years.
Mhm.
Didn't you see any irregularities before in the past? I mean, everybody I'm involved with this because in 2016,
Yeah.
I heard in the Democratic, the lawyers in Florida go, hey, the Democratic Party, if they wanted to, can go in the back room full of cigar smoke and pick whoever they wanted. And I was like, wait, let's go. And that was 2016. We saw a bunch of irregularities. And even on January 6th, about 500 yards from the steps of the Capitol, somebody asked me why it was an election integrity. I told him he had his Trump hat on and everything. He looked me in the face and he goes, you know what? We didn't pay attention then when it happened. I'm sorry. And I could see in his face. So you've been doing this for a long time. Why now this election call it out, not maybe the past elections? I mean, Georgia's had its issues.
Okay, the past elections, there were long lines, but I figure in screams of voter suppression and all of that. And I thought, they just hired these stupid people, or people who've never been managers before are being managers and they don't know how to manage polls. It's just incompetence. But then when I was in the warehouse, it was just so eye-opening that this is intentional, this incompetence and this. And then the fact that I can't get basic, simple questions answered and people not answering my questions. And they're pretty big concerns. Like if you catch somebody printing ballots, random ballots, that's kind of a big concern. You would think people
Red
would
flags
like,
should be going up all over. Like, what are you doing? Like,
oh my gosh, how did that happen? Let's pull the cameras. Let's the investigators. Let's find out who this question Dominique. Let's Mike Prendergast.
The
elections groups. They are consultants from Chicago that came in to work voter registration. What is somebody who's working voter registration in our warehouse the week before the election on his laptop most of the time, but then printing ballots at 10 o'clock at night?
Past elections, you haven't seen a lot of stuff like this before.
No,
so this was like really over the top this time.
Yes, it was way over the top.
So you've been doing this for 9 years, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Your personal opinion, just your opinion here. With all the irregularities that you saw, what could be the main area of concern in which you think could have happened? Do you think it was multiple ballots could have been printed for particular candidates and then clustered into the machine? Would that be your biggest area of concern?
The absentee ballots are a big concern. My absentee ballots were missing in the plethora of absentee ballots. And then later, listening to Susie's testimony, watching the videos, the Ruby Freeman Happy Faces employee, scanning ballots multiple times. And I think that's a big concern. The ballot marking devices, the military ballots were done on the ballot marking devices, recreated.
So they recreated a lot of ballot, which is a big no-no. I mean, sometimes it could happen, but it's not supposed to be a lot of them.
Well, the military came in, I don't know if it was 12% or 15% went for Trump. And typically a batch of ballots is 100. And there's a batch of military ballots that's 950 and it's 100% Biden.
Yeah. How did you see this?
Oh, it's on the Secretary of State website.
Okay.
You can pull up the batches. You can see all the military ballots. So what Fulton County does and that's why they say Susie's testimony isn't good, because pristine ballots are military ballots, ones that had to be recreated. Well, the problem is in Fulton County, they didn't just recreate an absentee ballot, because the military may email their ballot in.
Yeah.
They took the email and then they recreated the ballot on the ballot marking device and printed it out. So there's these batches of military ballots that are all Biden.
I don't even know if that's legal, and if it is legal, it shouldn't be legal. No email it in. They should be able to mail it in or something. I mean, I don't know. I would see.
There needs to be a better process.
Yeah. I mean, you couldn't even convince me, first of all, that Biden would win 20% of those votes, but that's beside the point. I don't want to get into possibilities and stuff. So
it just draws that suspicion.
Yeah.
And can we see these ballots that were recreated? Because that was a complaint of the poll watchers. That's how we knew the process was, because a poll watcher videotaped the process, and she couldn't even get within 20 feet of the person recreating those ballots to make sure they were doing them correctly.
Yeah. Was it like one person doing
It was actually one of my son's best friend even got hired to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess we can go back. We can look at your testimony, Tootie, from the Senate hearing. We can just hope. Do you think there's been anything in play? Have you seen anything to say that, hey, we're going to correct these errors of the past moving forward? We haven't even got into the whole thing about the tabulation machine, as far as that being proprietary software that Dominion has, that ES&S has and stuff. That's even like another issue. But from everything you've seen, has there been any area of like improving that area?
No, it's exactly the opposite. I see no change. Right now, Fulton County is trying to renew their contract with Happy Faces for another year for $7+ million. So that's how much they asked for last year when they had multiple elections and a presidential election. Now this year we only have like a mayor's race, city council, very small elections, and they're still asking for $7 million. So it's almost like we're going to use Happy Faces more now, not less.
Yeah.
Even though the Secretary of State told them not to use, that they rely too heavily on these temp workers.
Whose decision is that? That's the board, the 5 people on the board?
No, it's the Fulton County commissioners who approve.
How many people? How many commissioners are there?
7.
Okay, so they get to choose and whatnot. With the new Georgia law, though, I believe now that will be different.
Well, the new Georgia law, you can have election workers in neighboring counties.
You still can.
Well, it used to be you could only use them in your county.
Yeah.
Now they made it legal that you can use neighboring counties.
Yeah.
So that law, I really believe, needs to be tightened up.
Yeah.
That I think it's okay to use temporary employees, but not have them handle ballots.
Yeah. Okay.
They should not handle ballots or equipment.
Well, I'm a little bit different. I believe we should have the most secure staff there can be when it comes to our elections. It's one of the most important things. I thank you so much for testifying and coming to speak with us today and stuff. This is so important.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, no doubt. Please stay in touch with me. Give us any updates you can give us, and any friends you got that want to talk to the Convo Couch. We want to talk about this. Like we said, this isn't bipartisan. This should be nonpartisan, and I appreciate you for your testimony. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Bridget. Let's bring on in Susan, and thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, you can always go back to the Senate hearing, take a look in Georgia. That was Bridget Thorne. And we're going to bring in Susie Voyles, right? Did I say your last name right?
You said that right.
Oh, by the way, we have Good Work Pasta. It pains me that they don't need to risk the longer trusting party for the buck. There's a big comment. They use the technology to cheat us, the chain of custody, all the blah, blah, blah. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. If you're over on the YouTube, please go over to the Rokfin, ROKFIN. I know it's really early for our audience today, but we had to do it nice and early. Susie, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you doing?
Pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much.
Pleasure to be here.
So I heard there's a bunch of affidavits signed, 6 in particular. Some people had the issues we talked about with our last guest, Bridget, but you have a little different thing, what you saw, what you witnessed. Please explain to our audience maybe how long you've been doing this for and what you witnessed and what you signed an affidavit for.
I actually signed a few affidavits. I've been a poll manager in Fulton County for over 20 years.
Okay.
So I've had 2 Democrat secretaries of state and 3 Republican. I started seeing things from the moment I started doing this. So this is not an issue that deals with Republican or Democrat.
Yeah.
It had to do with ballot safety. I always believed when I walked into that poll, it was for a civic duty. It wasn't for a partisan duty.
Okay.
And
but
so
for just for the record, are you a conservative? Are you a Democrat? Or does it, you know what I'm saying, independent?
For the record, I am conservative.
Okay. I just want to point that out there because a lot of people will say, oh, it's just conservative, but I agree with you too. I'm a leftist. You know what I'm saying? I call myself a leftist libertarian. So we're here on the same page fighting for the same issue right now. So
Well, it's important to me because what they do to me today, they can do to you tomorrow and vice
Exactly.
versa. That's why ballot integrity, election integrity means everything. This was not about the outcome of the election. This is about every other election going forward.
Yeah.
And I've been talking about a number of things
Yeah.
over the years.
Over 20 years of doing this.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't start at my first election, but I could see some things that had to be starting to tightened up. I remember talking to Kathy Cox in the days on election night when you could get through immediately to her on the phone. She was the Secretary of State, late 90s, early 2000s. And she was a Democrat. She was very fair. I had people wanting to come in and vote from Florida, and they assured me that they could vote there. And she assured me that I was right, that they could not vote there.
They could not vote.
To vote in Florida. So fast forward, I have been noticing things a number of years. 2018.
Okay.
I was becoming even more concerned over the issuance of third-party absentee ballot requests. That would be like if, the mothers of Sandy Springs wanted to make sure every stay-at-home mom voted, for example. That's facetious, but a facetious title. But my neighbor across the street had moved.
Yes.
And he had sold his home. In the meantime, a young couple had moved in. I know this seems kind of lengthy, but the young couple moved in, and then he passed away. So when it comes time for all the primary ballots, I'm suddenly I was collecting the mail because his young wife didn't want to stay there. So she'd come by and pick it up once a week. So I've got my one neighbor that had moved out in December of 2017. I'm getting one for this person who's been deceased, and these were all third party type. And I thought, if I weren't honest, I could vote both of these. I could request them. I'm getting the mail, and I could do that.
You can harvest them for sure.
But and I reported that to the Secretary of State's office and to Fulton County. I've been reporting a number of things over the years where I saw lax chain of custody.
Yeah. Could you give me an example, like over the last couple of years?
I'll give you one from most recently. How's that?
Please.
When it came time for the election, typically we receive all our material with the ballot marking devices, and they come into I have a school. I had a school. I've been fired.
Sorry. Oops.
My poll is still in the school. I'm just not there anymore.
Gotcha.
But they would typically come in on Fridays prior to the Tuesday election.
Gotcha.
So that on Sunday, we would pick up things like our poll pads. We would pick up a long list of items that we marked on the chain of custody, including our voter access cards, if we were issued a phone, things like this.
Yeah.
And then set up on Monday.
So you're ready to rock and roll on Tuesday.
That's
Got it.
Absolutely right. And I have always prided myself in the crew that I have had. We look at this like a regular job, even though it's only a few times a year and it's cyclical. I want people who are honest. I don't care. I want them to be competent. In other words, they're able to follow instructions and complete the task or the job.
Yeah.
I want them to be willing to attend everything that they should attend, whether it's training, whether it is set up on Mondays, and definitely to be there on time on Tuesdays.
How many people are about in this staff, just so we can get an idea of what's going on in your old job, the old school poll?
I'd be happy to. My staff was always 9.
9.
And we'll come back to that
Gotcha.
in a little bit. But so on Sunday, when I went to go pick up my things,
this is November election.
This is the November election.
Gotcha.
Nothing was ready.
And was that odd after doing this for so many years, for 20 years?
I've never seen it a mess like that.
Okay.
Particularly, it's not. It reminded me, if you'll excuse me here with this analogy, It reminded me of a husband who suddenly says, "Oh, my stars, today's my anniversary." I mean, we know dates like that are coming up all the time.
Yeah.
My husband never does that, so it's all right.
but
I can use that one.
I gotta get flowers. I gotta get chocolates. Oh my. So it was one of those things.
And so they've known the election was coming up.
Yeah.
That's their job, is to know when the election is coming up. And particularly with the things that they had going on this year. So he said, "You don't have anything on this list, but you have to sign it." And I said, "You're asking me to sign this chain of custody document without receiving
Any of
anything?"
the stuff.
And he said, "Well, if you don't sign it, you can't work." And I had begun to notice a pattern, particularly with me. And so I signed it, but above my name, I wrote, "I have not received anything on this list." So he quickly files it away. He didn't even notice I wrote that. And I had my copy. So I just figured there was no way I was not going to make sure that I wasn't covered. But there was also no way I was not going to work, because what I had seen, particularly under the guise of COVID, we were told that some of the old people did not want to work anymore. Well, they're some of the most faithful, and that is probably the best security that you can have in a poll. For example, in the poll where I had worked, we knew who were the first couple in line. We knew when his wife could no longer come because she had Alzheimer's. We knew everything.
It was like a community. It was connected. You knew it. You'd done it for a while.
And we also knew the people who were most likely phony.
Okay.
I had a young man come in one time and he said, "I've been voting at this poll for 20 years. And I said, "Oh, that's marvelous." And he said, "Yep, and I'm holding his driver's license at this point." And I said, "Oh, that's really great that you take this that seriously." And he said, "Yeah, in fact, the first guy I ever voted for was Ronald Reagan." And I'm looking at his driver's license, and he was born in 1974.
Yeah.
I
couldn't have voted for Ronald Reagan.
I want to say, if you're going to tell me a lie, at least know your history.
You couldn't vote when you were 6. So
right. But there was no reason for me to deny him. But I was starting to see a pattern of people who registered within the 45 days that was, required.
Yeah.
At this one apartment complex. And I started telling Kathy Cox. I told Karen Handel. I told Brian Kemp and then Brad Rassenberger. I said, "I'm noticing this really odd pattern where people have time to register to vote, but they don't seem to have time to change their out-of-state driver's license, which is 30 days before, and you can do the two simultaneously."
Yes.
So with this pattern, everybody kind of went, and I'm seeing just enough voters, and knowing how many voters per precinct, it only takes 1.2 voters per precinct to swing a statewide election. So there were typically 8 to 10 people from this one apartment complex. I mean, there were more who actually lived there, but there were this transient 8 to 10 that were always different. So that was kind of suspicious to me. And these were things that I was noticing. There was no way I was giving up what I believed to be a matter of security. Well, on Monday, we went there and our machines still weren't there. And so I called Fulton County and I said, "When am I going to get my BMDs?" And they said, "Soon." I said, "Well, how soon? The election's tomorrow."
Yeah, I know.
And we kind of went through all of this and they said, "They'll be there." Well, the end of that story was the poor janitor had to be there. They weren't delivered until 2 a.m. election morning. And when I opened them up, we had to be there strangely early at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And that's not typical. And I hadn't gotten my poll pads. They were delivered to a high school, not the school where I was, at 7 o'clock. And a lot of us were told to come there and pick those up at that point. We checked the tags, made sure those were okay. So this poor guy sits there, and typically you want them to be charging overnight.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we didn't have any problem with that. The electricity was on. But the little seals that were supposed to be covering where, the memory cards are,
Yeah.
they weren't there. One thing I've always been taught is if any seals are missing, any seals are broken, you always, take that particular machine out of commission.
Okay.
I was told by my he was kind of a mid-layer manager that was between me and my area supervisor. And he was a Happy Faces employee. He says, "Oh, this is no big deal." Because I called him and I said, "We have 3 machines where the doors are open, the seals are broken." And I'm talking about the sticker type seals with a barcode on them. And he said, "That's not a big deal, not a big deal. Just go ahead and use the machine." Well, I'd done this long enough to know that my poll was my decision. I was responsible for that. And so fortunately we had enough machines and a light enough turnout that it wasn't going to hinder things by my doing that.
Yeah.
So
those machines, you took them out of commission.
I did.
Okay.
Then our first people come up and I just thought, this is really, and we didn't even have our chain of custody sheets. That was really strange.
This is a new system too, by the way, right? Or no?
Well, we had used the system in the primaries before and in early voting. So you can't blame that. And this was supposed to be an easier system. It was definitely easier to set up.
Okay.
And by that, I mean, one thing Fulton County did right is we had these huge cabinets on wheels.
Mm-hmm.
So before we used to have to lift a 55-pound voting machine, the DREs. And now in essence, we just kind of wheel them around and open them up and there they are.
That's it.
Easier for everybody.
The DREs were the direct recorded ones. And now you're going to paper ballot, which is a ballot marking device. So, but even still, the system's a lot more easy to transport, whatnot. But you know that if something's wrong with the machines, and I'm just retelling the story so our audience can understand, that you running the poll place can take them out of commission. So you had enough other machines, you took these out of commissions and you went with the other machines you had.
Correct.
Okay.
One of the things we'd always been told is these machines were not connected to the internet whatsoever. However, our first 2 people who come up to the poll pads, both of them are being told they're in the wrong location and they're not allowed to vote there. So my assistant manager calls me over, I sit down, and when I looked at it initially, I'm thinking, oh my stars, why are they sending them 25 miles away to Adams Park Library? And, sometimes you can look at something and expect to see something, and then you look closely and you realize what you're really looking at.
Yeah.
I looked closely. My machines were actually programmed for Adams Park Library. So where the pin was dropped, as you would on any GPS or anything, that was showing the location for which they were, not where they were supposed to be, but where it was registering that the poll pads were for. Now my tags on the machine said SSO2 A and B, which is up in Sandy Springs.
Okay.
Sandy Springs 02, and it's a dual poll. Hence the A and the B. Well, this just seemed really kind of odd to me. So I called the techs and I said, I have this problem. My poll pads are all programmed for the wrong place.
Yeah.
I said, I can vote emergency ballots until you get here, but I need these things fixed. I either need my correct ones or you need to do something. Not thinking about it at all. And then when they show up at about 9:00, and people weren't unhappy because what we did is they hand voted, but then they ran them through the scanners.
Mm-hmm.
So in essence, it was kind of the best of 2 worlds for them. We got that fixed, but the way they fixed it was just like I'd pick up my phone. If I've got a problem with my phone and I call Apple and I say, I've got a problem with my phone or my iPad, they'll say, do I have your permission to go in on the backside? Dominion was in Colorado. They were calling Dominion in Colorado. The guy said to me, I've got to call Dominion in Colorado and get this fixed. And it didn't click then until
Yes.
I saw them actually reprogramming my iPad.
Remotely.
And then I said, as long as you're here, I've got an issue with my BMDs. Can you fix that too?
Yeah.
And he said, oh, I bet you we can. He's still on the phone after the other was fixed. And so they were able to correct that problem.
Yes.
Remotely.
Yes.
And so.
And just to make sure, that's to change the, I guess, the IP address from, it was programmed for a different precinct to
Correct.
change it to the right one.
Correct.
And he did that remotely from Colorado.
Correct.
Which is a big no-no because there's supposed to be an air gap, they say, and no intranet. But as we saw at the Senate hearing, even when Javon Hutton Polis said, hey, we're talking to the machines right now, they're talking back to us. You experienced this on election day.
I did. And if I can come back to that, what we did by the time I was fired was I had some friends in Texas working on the same thing. And what they said to do, and I got a little crew of people to go into the parking lots of these polling places. They turned the Wi-Fi off on their phone, waited about 15, 20 seconds, turned it back on, and took a screenshot of all the available Wi-Fis. And then they went one step further and took a screenshot of the addresses for them.
So they saw Wi-Fi's with addresses in the polling places that weren't supposed to have internet. How many places about did you guys do that to? That you found?
We did that to all but one polling location.
How much is that? How many is that?
I would say that was probably about 75 polling locations.
Hooked up to the internet
Yes.
on election day.
I only concentrated in one area.
But still, it's Fulton County. This is where we've had a lot of issues. But there's more to your story, I'm assuming. So please go on, because we haven't even got to the juicy part yet. But.
Right. So after the election and after we got everything turned in, and I was seeing some very strange numbers. I've done this a long time.
Yeah.
Even when we were majority Democrat, and you kind of get used to your neighborhood and what it's like. There's never been a split, like this. Most of the splits are like this.
Yeah.
And what we were seeing in this neighborhood was, we were seeing splits that were far too wide. I mean,
what do you mean by splits?
Okay, in other words, maybe 5 to 10 points one way or the other.
Yeah.
We were seeing maybe like 70 points on our tapes.
Okay.
And on our counting. We had to take pictures from our training manuals to get our closing. We'd never been given those. They had these large trash can scanners.
Yeah.
And they also had a regular scanner in the machine. And our trash can scanner, we didn't get keys for until noon. So I go to open it and run my tape, and there's a ballot in it. And this same young guy was making his rounds, and he was over there, and he said, I'll take that. And I said, no, you won't take that.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I'll take that. And I said, we kept going back. Even the ACLU attorney who was in there doing the absentee ballots is, she's focused in on this. And she even said after the day was over, she said, I can't believe how professionally you handled this. And none of this was making, you connect the dots sometimes afterwards. She said, if there's anything that you need, I'll defend you pro bono.
Yeah. So
I thought that was very nice when she said that, but it became, a much different picture a few weeks later.
Yeah.
So after we got everything turned in, and somebody came and stole my tapes. And I've never had that happen in all the years I've been doing this.
What do you mean? Yeah.
We have to put the tapes up.
It's the report of each and they have everybody. So you have now a tracking chain of custody. It's there. It's the trackability. So it's on. You tape them on the doors out front.
We send 2 in with, all the cards and everything like that. Then we tape 1 set to the door.
Exactly.
So if you're a candidate, you can send somebody to come by and say, yay, we won SSO2, and you write the number down and then
Exactly.
you add it up.
Yeah.
So you kind of have an idea before. So that was odd to me that by the time we come to load more things in our car,
Tape's gone.
that they're gone. And they're on the inside window, which means it was deliberate, nothing. And I've never had that happen.
Yeah.
I've
And
had
you've been doing this for 20 years now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
I would think that if anybody thought about taking those, that would be like a serious crime or fine or something. Like I would never, I've seen those on the doors in Florida. We see those, but like I put my hands behind my back when I look at them because I don't want to, that's something sacred over there. That's really kind of part of the chain of custody and a part of knowing who's winning and who's losing. So there's transparency and trackability.
that's right. So we take all our things back that night. We call it a night,
Mhm.
and then we see, we've already talked about how the returns come out and things like that.
Yeah.
Well, then about 2 weeks later, I get a call from Marie Wright, who is my supervisor.
Yeah.
And
Just 1 second. I'm gonna move this a little bit close towards you right here. Go ahead.
she said, Susan, we need some help. And I said, what's that? And she said, we need people here tomorrow. We need managers and assistant managers to come and do the audit. And I said, well, sure. She said, this is the only thing. You have to come all 5 days, Saturday through Wednesday. You have to come 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And so I called my 2 assistant managers, and one couldn't come on Monday and one couldn't come on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And so I said, is that all right? She said, oh no, we need everybody if they can't commit. And they were paying us. It was nice, $200 a day.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, I'm the only one who can come. I talked to a couple other managers that were supposed to be coming, and we went down together. Here was the first problem. My friend and I walked in together. We signed, and next to some numbers. And she said, whatever number you have signed next to, that's the table where you'll be sitting. And
Yeah.
I was 136.
This is the first one?
This is on Saturday. I believe it was November. Golly, I should have the date in my head. I believe it's November 15th.
This is like after the Trump campaign requested a first recount, I think, or the number's close enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were only separated by a little over 10,000.
Exactly. Yeah.
And people had taken screenshots, throughout the evening and noticed irregularities. So we were in there doing the audit, but this was not an audit. We were just.
Why is it not an audit? Tell me why.
All we were doing, each batch, and a batch is to have 100.
Yes.
Each batch had a sheet of paper on it.
Yes.
With a tally on it.
Yes.
We were just confirming the tally.
That's it.
Yeah.
Putting them back into the Arlo machine, I believe. Was that the one or no?
No, we were just confirming the tally.
That's it.
And then we were writing a new tally on top of that. That was it.
So you weren't counting, you were just confirming the
No. Well, we had to count and confirm.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so you count the ballots and confirm the tally.
Correct.
Okay.
And so, we had a pile for, I believe the pile was not alphabetical. It was Trump, Biden, Jorgensen, write-ins, and then we had a manila envelope if there were problems beyond that.
Yeah.
So here we are doing this, and I'm sitting with my friend. Well, fortunately, both of us are honest, but that is bad protocol to begin with.
Yeah. Can you explain why it's bad protocol so people can understand that there? Because a lot of people like, well, the audit one place was legit. They made sure the tallies were right and everything was right. And that's, what I'm saying? Biden won 3 times is what they keep saying and stuff. Can you explain why somebody's been doing this for 20 years, why this is a bad practice of just confirming the tallies?
Yes, because I've already told you I'm a conservative.
Yeah.
So was my friend.
Yes.
And yes, we're both honest, but we never should have been placed together. And we're also friends.
Yes.
So, that could have clouded.
Okay.
But they were fortunate that these 2 friends happened to be honest.
Yes.
And so we're going through this box, and the first thing that happens, it's a cardboard box. There was no signature on the top of the box with the secretary's seal on it. There should have been 2 signatures on that white seal, but there weren't. And I said, is there another chain of custody on the inside? And they said, no. And I said, well, where is my chain of custody sticker when we're done with this? You don't need that. You don't need that. And I said, yes, I do. So as we proceeded, the batches, as I said, are supposed to be batches of 100.
Yeah.
Most of these look very suspicious to me. And by that, I mean, you don't typically have 800 ballots where less than 40 of them are for Trump and 7 of them are for Jorgensen.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for a long time. The numbers just are not that massive. But there was, go ahead.
I just want to stay there 1 second, because people say to me all the time, and I just talked to a reporter. He's like, yeah, but the Democrats, they blame the Republicans, and Republicans, they always say they always got cheated. I said, listen, the thing that is so eye-opening is the voting patterns are so off. You just don't see that much of a discrepancy.
That's right.
And I said, I think for Trump to have lost the races in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, those 4 states, the way he was so far behind Biden, it's more likely that you get struck by lightning while cashing a lottery ticket, because you understand, and I explain this to a lot of progressives. I say, how do you think they called the primary for Joe Biden with 63%? Because they have those voting patterns there that are pretty solid. Now, you've been doing this for 20 years, and you're confirming that you just don't see them go that far out of craziness of the voting pattern. But now you're witnessing, I heard there was 850 votes for Biden from the military at one point and 0 for Trump, which is like, I think that you're more likely to get struck by lightning 3 times while catching 3 lottery tickets for that to happen. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this particular subject and what you witnessed right here? Because this is important, because this is how a lot of election integrity activists go, wait, there's a spike here, and that's unexplained. We have to look at these ballots right here, please.
Well, I'd be happy to. And the suspicious ballots, to me, it was obvious to me, who's done this for a long time, that they had most likely been harvested, but there was nothing I could prove with those. But the reason they were suspicious to me is, you've already heard of the long column to replace Johnny Iversen, filled with what we call a jungle primary with Republicans and Democrats. And you could tell somebody went by and said, here's an absentee ballot for you. Would you like to fill it out?
Yeah.
Well, I don't even know who to vote for. Well, just vote for all the Democrats. And the reason I'm saying that is because in that column, and we saw so many of these, it was too much to be a coincidence. In that column alone, every Democrat was circled where you're only supposed to be voting for one person. So that brings into question another race, but that's a discussion for another time.
Okay.
Because how did they count that Senate vote? But then I came upon a particular batch, and this is what I wrote my affidavit on.
Okay.
And this particular batch was 110. And when I pulled it out, I had a latex glove on one hand. And the only reason I had that was to make sure that when I was doing my count, that the ballots weren't sticking together.
Exactly.
And I had one free hand.
Yes.
And as I put my free hand on these ballots, all of a sudden I said, Barbara, there is something. I said, look at these ballots. And I remember touching the ballots over and over because the paper was so unique.
Okay.
There were also no defined creases in them. So if they'd been in a drop box, then, they would have been in 2 envelopes. There should have been some.
Absolutely.
If they'd been absentee ballots, even if they'd been a provisional ballot.
Yes.
So they can try and talk me out of what I saw.
Yes.
However, that was the next irregularity. On Biden's ballot, on his little bubble, there was a little eclipse of white. The bubble was not filled in. And I said, Barbara, these are all machine generated.
They look similar, each one?
The 107 in that batch that were for Biden were exactly the same. They didn't look similar. They were exactly the same.
107 out of 110, you said too, right?
Yes.
So 3 votes for Trump, 100, no,
2 votes for Trump,
1 for Jorgensen, and 107 for Biden.
But that's not all. All of the other votes, whether it was for Senate, whether it was for state Senate, whether it was for a referendum on the back, whether it was, we have a soil and conservation person in Fulton County, and we had 3 referendums. All of those votes, front and back on 107 ballots, were identical. Now,
They had the same votes for each one,
yes,
each thing.
they
So
were.
these are 107 identical ballots out of 110.
And you can try and tell me those were all adjudicated. And if that's the case, then whoever was adjudicating them was, but I think what I saw, this is the part I can't prove. I can prove all those were fraudulent ballots.
Yeah.
Because all the votes were the same.
Yeah.
But I think they were some of the test ballots that Bridget had printed,
Yes.
not knowing that somebody might be slicing, putting them. She was just doing what
This
she
is when
should
it
have been
comes
doing.
full circle. But aren't there ballots, Susie, that don't have to be folded in certain situations? Like I heard there's a
Well, there,
certain situations where there'll be ballots that weren't folded. Now these are absentee ballots. I'm assuming you're counting, right?
that's what I was told. I was
Yeah,
counting.
okay.
Absentee drop box
Box ballot.
ballots.
Well, now there's a smoking gun because now you need to have folds in them and stuff. Okay. But then later on, I believe somebody said, well, there are situations where they don't fold ballots.
Well, I just told you about the
Yeah.
situation in my own poll
Yeah.
where we had an emergency situation and we didn't fold those. We ran them through the scanner
Scanner
and they
machine.
went straight into the drop box.
Yeah.
Now, people who voted provisional,
Yeah.
we folded theirs up. But I really try to avoid provisional whenever possible.
Yeah.
And by whenever possible, I mean, I would never use those emergency ballots. I would never have voted those people provisional because they go into a separate pile. I wanted these people to know that their vote was going to count. It had gone through
Yeah.
the scanner. Everything was fine.
I'm so sorry because I'm smiling, and I know Johnny's probably laughing on the other end as he's engineering some stuff. Is that with 2020 this time around, when it came to California and Los Angeles, we knew the game was they're going to push progressives, Bernie voters, into provisional ballots because those ballots require more scrutiny to get counted. Well, we found places where the machines went down, or for some reason they were removed from the rolls, and there was a crazy amount of provisional ballots. And in one particular place, I went into a polling spot and I said, "Sir, why are you filling out a provisional ballot?" Because Johnny, the engineer, my other partner over there, he saw a stack of provisionals on the table. I said, were you not registered to vote? He goes, "No, I tried to vote twice. I've been here for 45 minutes. The machine ate it up and they said these are the same thing." And I started yelling at the guy. I'm like, "That is not the same thing. That ballot's not going to be counted. I want this gentleman's vote to be counted for sure." And I started arguing with the guy. So I'm so sorry I had to tell that story.
Well,
but
that's all right.
you have the same feelings because you just said right there, you wanted these person's votes to be counted. That's why you didn't move them into a provisional. So, I mean, wow.
Well, and fortunately, on Sunday, after I had the chain of custody issue, I
Yes.
called my county commissioner and I said, "Lee, I know you're busy. I know you've got issues out the wazoo with the general election coming on Tuesday." I said, "But I need to talk to you." I said, "There are serious problems." This is Sunday prior to the election.
Like 2 days. Yeah. Not
And
even.
I said, there are just not even irregularities. There are serious problems with the way this is being handled. And one thing I didn't mention, our daughter is also a poll manager up
Yeah.
in Milton County. I mean, Milton, boy, that's a wishful thinking. The city of Milton.
Gotcha.
And she was spending the night at our house.
Yeah.
She tends to oversleep sometimes.
Yeah.
So to make sure she got up, she did not receive her poll pads until 12:30 in a Publix parking lot. So here we have
What day was that?
Tuesday morning of the election
Wait, 12:30?
to after midnight. Yes.
Oh, so you're talking like literally hours
Hours
before the
before.
election, less than 8 hours before that. Those things are open up 7 o'clock, the doors. Okay.
And I'll tell you one thing, I pride myself, and I've taught my kids to pride themselves on customer service and being courteous.
Yeah.
And if you're tired, it's not as easy. You really got to step up your game a little bit.
Yeah.
A little extra coffee. But anyway, so knowing all these irregularities, that's where I said, Lee, we've got a serious problem. Interestingly, before I started counting ballots, I went up to Rob Pitts and Richard Barron. They were standing there, and he must know everybody in the county, because I haven't seen him for years, but he addressed me by name, and he said, "I'm so glad to see you." And he's a pretty nice
This
tempered
Barron
guy.
or
No, this is Rob Pitts,
who's
chairman of the Fulton County Commission.
Gotcha.
And I said, "Sir, I would like to talk to you." And I turned to Richard Barron. I said, "I'd be happy to have you in on this." I said, "We've got some serious issues that we need to correct before our next election." And I was really grateful that I had said both of those to my county commissioner and to them prior to counting these. So when I come to counting them, we're told we've got to be there until Wednesday.
Yeah.
You can't come all 5 days. We don't want you. So then we worked until about 4:30 on Saturday. We were told to be back there first thing Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
But when we walked in, we had left with pallets of ballots up in the front.
Mm-hmm.
And we happened to have talked to the security man, and we said, "Tell me, do you have to be here 24 hours? Are you sleeping here?" He said, "Oh no, we're on shifts." He said, "I'm just coming on for the 5 to 11 shift, and then somebody else will come in." And he was explaining how the shifts work, but somebody would be there. And we're seeing all these cardboard boxes and all these ballot boxes. The typical ballot box is square, kind of a heavy canvas cover.
Yeah.
Cube-ish, but it's on wheels. They're very distinct. And he said, everything is very secure. When we walked in Sunday morning, though, not only were we shocked at the lack of people who were there, most of the other auditors had been told they didn't need to come back. They were Fulton County workers.
Yeah.
The gals behind us were 2 librarians. I know they were Fulton County workers in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
We sat and we sat and we sat. We waited 45 minutes, and we were first there. And no ballots came. The gals in front of us had about 6,000 ballots. The gals behind us had over 3,000, and I paid attention to those. They were from Sandy Springs, so I was kind of had my ear open for those.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally they bring ours.
Mm-hmm.
I'm opening the box expecting to see, a volume. And I looked inside and I said, "Barbara, look at these."
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even have a whole batch. We had 60 ballots in there. And they were from a place called Quality Living Centers. It was a senior men's recovery center.
Okay.
They were all ballots that had been generated on the BMD.
Gotcha.
Out of those 60 ballots, 58 were for Biden, 2 were for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
That seemed a little unusual to me also. It also seemed unusual to me that they'd been done on a BMD. Why did they get that ballot marking device? We had mobile units, but was there a special BMD that was dedicated just for them?
Mm-hmm.
Taken to a unit with 60 people? Did this unit come by? Did the mobile unit come by? Where did and yes, I'm not saying,
Yeah.
I'm not saying they didn't have a right to vote. They absolutely did.
Yeah.
It just makes it rather curious. And having had an aunt who had a rehab facility order one for her, and I had already ordered one. We brought her up here from Tifton.
Mm-hmm.
So I already ordered one for her from Tift County. And the way I found out she even had 2 was when I went to have her sign, and she'd had a stroke.
You're talking about 2 absentee ballots.
I said, "Aunt Jean, she told me who she wanted." So I signed, I was assisting.
Yeah.
and she signed, this is back in the '08 election. This was a while ago.
Yeah.
But so I was used to this practice, and she said, "Oh, honey, did I not sign that before?" And I said, "What do you mean before?" And she said, "I thought I already did this."
Yeah.
And so I checked, and sure enough, she had a ballot in Cobb County and she had a ballot in Tift County.
Gotcha.
That's a felony.
Yeah.
So one way,
A felony against who though?
well, technically it was a felony against her, so I did not vote.
Because she accidentally voted. If she would vote twice, it would be a felony, is what you're saying.
Right.
Gotcha.
I said, "Well, who did you vote for?" She said, "Well, I didn't get a ballot. I was just told to sign the back." So that was a little suspicious to me.
So now your bells are ringing. You got 60 right now. It's coming from a senior facility. Now I'm sure the excuse could be, well, we got their ballots and we remade them maybe and said that's it.
It's very common for them to order the ballots to vote them for their residents. Even a friend of mine here in Roswell, and she was concerned about her mother. These are people that know what's going on. She's a former poll manager. When she went to vote her mother, it showed she had already voted.
Yeah.
And she said, "No, I haven't voted." And her mother can't drive, so she knew her mother had not. And as they investigated it, and I asked her, I said, "Betty, why didn't you say something?" And she said, "I wanted to say something, but I was afraid somebody would retaliate against my mom." And so this is a common practice here, where a lot of these ballots come in. And I was aware of that with this senior facility. I don't want to deny them their ability to vote. But then after we did that, 60 whole ballots, remember, they're paying us $200 for the day.
Yeah.
By 10:30, 10:45, they say, "Well, you're done." And I said, "What happened to all the ballots that were here yesterday?"
Yeah.
And they said, "They're done." And I thought, how could they be done from close of business at 5
Yeah.
to opening of business at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
the next day? But we didn't question that. And then, the rest of the story.
Yeah.
That Bridget and I were both told. Thank you very much for
your services.
For your years of services. And fortunately, both of us have many letters or emails, I guess I should say, commending our service. The fact that every time I moved, I was moved to a different poll, and then they wanted me to move. And I actually, when they opened up my old poll, got my old poll back. I'm not a cranky person, and I'm not a demanding person.
Yeah.
But I know when I have enough leverage to request something, and most of us were in that neighborhood, so we wanted to request something that was closer. 5 o'clock in the morning comes pretty early.
Yeah.
So always given what I need. But another thing was peculiar about the November election for me, and that was we were told we had to have line monitors. There were things that just weren't adding up. Why did I have to have these 2 line monitors with iPads when I had enough staff to handle this?
Yeah.
When you've got people that don't just sit around and do nothing. I was also given a girl who was supposed to be my line monitor. She was just, and she came in wrapped in headdress. She asked me she says, "I have to pray a certain amount of times a day. Is that okay?" And I said, "Well, absolutely." I said, "That works for me." I said, "That's important to me." And then I asked her if it was audible or if it was silent. And I said, "Before you answer that, either way for you, why don't you go into the media center? The school is closed." I said, "They'll have some privacy that way, and I'll get somebody else to cover your job at the line." I also got a call from our elections, one of our 2 election representatives, wanting to know what was going on at my poll with my line. And he said, "We're hearing there are 45-minute waits out there." And I said, "No, I haven't seen a 45-minute wait since 2000.
Yeah.
And he said, well, that's what we're hearing. So I thought, well, maybe she's doing such a good job. She's keeping everybody out and just a few people in. So I went outside and the sheriff was there and I said, I took a picture of it.
Yeah.
I said, is there a line? He says, no. As a matter of fact, the poor CBS guy's here because he was told there were massive lines. And he said, no, there haven't been any. And I said, okay, just checking. Then little things like that, where I realized things that I meant for corrective procedures that I had told to our election officials that he had meant to give to Richard Barron as corrective procedures. Suddenly, they're saying, she's too fastidious. We don't want her.
Too what?
Fastidious. In other words, I was with details.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure things were run properly.
Yeah.
Because your vote's important.
Yeah.
My vote's important. I want the people at my poll. We even had to deputize somebody one time to go and vote for her husband who was in the hospital.
Yeah.
And granted, we told her how she had to get her absentee ballot back to him. I mean, she couldn't bring it back to us. She had to get it to the elections office. And she was willing to do that. So everybody's vote is I hate to use the word, but it's sacred.
It is.
It's their responsibility and their right.
Yeah.
And so then it's also my responsibility to protect what they have come to execute.
So 20 years you've been doing this.
I have.
This was one of the elections you saw that was like, wow, this is really everything, from not getting your materials in time to not getting your ballot marking devices until very late.
And everything being so unsecure.
Yeah. That's also a red flag. So your affidavits were signed specifically for those ballots that you saw out of the 110, the 107 looked the same, identical on the back. Did you see any more than 100 and so? Because people go, oh, it's only 100 ballots and stuff. But I mean, that's what we see. That could be another stack of 100, another stack of 100. And we also think that possibly it could be from those test ballots that we said, what are you doing with those test ballots? So
I saw a lot more. But the only reason I wrote my affidavit about that 107 was that was something that could be proven absolutely.
Okay.
And I do know that one of our senators and two of our congressmen received a letter not naming me, but using the word pristine and trying to discredit it and trying to discredit something else that somebody else had written an affidavit about. And I spoke to all three of them.
Yeah.
And they said, it didn't fly with us. You don't have to worry. So, when somebody tries to, on top of everything else, discredit you and tarnish your name.
Yeah.
That's really kind of aggravating. I mean, it's bad enough to have somebody tell you, this. And there's two men. One of them is Hans von Spakowski and the other is John Fund. Both of them are probably the two most expert in international voting.
Gotcha.
Not just US voting.
International.
Right. In other words, voting security. And they have been watching trends. They see what works, what doesn't work. And they've written numerous books. One of them is called Who's Counting?
Yeah.
And that comes from what Lenin said. It doesn't matter,
It's not Lenin.
Stalin.
There
Thank
you
you.
go.
Well,
You got the wrong Marxist. So it
well,
doesn't matter who casts the votes. The power lies with those who count the votes.
And that was the first time I've seen this played out. But these two men, I would highly recommend anybody who wants to know about voting integrity, just read that book. And you can see what's the shenanigans that have gone on everywhere. And these are the sort of things. I grew up in California. So I was used to a very different system, but I've been here 40 years.
Yeah.
And the people in my poll are not there to collect their roughly $200. They're not there because they have nothing else to do that day. It's a hard day.
Yeah.
And when you set up the day before and you're
Yeah.
there at 5:30 in the morning, and then sometimes you don't get out until 10 o'clock at
Yeah.
night.
They're there because they care about the vote.
And by getting out, I mean, you've taken all your stuff back and everything
Yeah,
like
I know what
that.
you mean.
Yeah, they're there because they really care.
Yeah.
They want to do a service.
Yeah.
And it really grieves me that there are people. I love this country.
Yeah.
I believe in this country. And it grieves me that there are people who would want to trample on somebody else's right to vote
Yeah. Okay.
by running a shoddy system.
Yeah. Well, some people think that the ends justify the means, and I don't think they ever do. As an election integrity activist, talking with somebody who's worked for elections for a long time, it's refreshing to see somebody who takes this as the sacred act or practice that we have as Americans, is to make sure it's one person, one vote. And I can't thank you enough for talking to me today and whatnot. If there's anything you want to close with in your personal opinion about what you think might have happened with this election, as far as elaborating too much, where we went really wrong, can you tell us that?
I don't think we went wrong.
Yeah.
From what I've seen over the last couple of years, I think there has been a buildup, particularly when I watched elections. I look at Young Kim's election. I think we've become too afraid of being called names rather than being accurate.
Mhm.
And by that, I mean, when ballots are discovered, I don't care whether they're in Florida, whether it was Young Kim's election in California, I don't care whether it was things here. If the law is, it should be done in this precise manner, then it's everyone from the electorate to those running for office and those managing, to make sure that that letter of the law is precisely followed.
Yeah.
Can I add one more thing?
Please, please.
The one more thing I'm going to say is there's been this debate about the January election, about how many people said, well, my vote's not going to count.
You mean the November election?
No, the January
The
runoff.
January runoff. Okay.
I want to tell you one thing.
Yeah.
If you don't go, your vote will not count. I
Yeah.
can assure you of that.
Yeah.
You have to at least exercise that responsibility so this can be worked out. And
Yeah.
we're praying by the municipal elections it is.
Yeah. Well, that's a very big request, because the thing that really deters people from going to vote is the fact that when the system is broke and they don't think their vote will count, that's really going to send people away from the polls. And that's why we have such a low turnout, is because people don't think that their vote counts. So it's going to be hard for us to convince people to get off their butts and go vote. But I think what you're doing is amazing. And once again, is this about, well, I'll give you a handshake, but is this about Trump or Biden, or is this about getting it right for the future?
This is about getting it right.
Yeah.
And because we want those people to feel like when they go to vote, their vote counts, and it counts the way they wanted it to count, not just as a number.
Yeah.
We want people, I have a lot of first-time voters who come into my poll.
Yeah.
And they're so excited, and their poor parents, we have to, they've got their iPhone out or their Android or whatever, they want to take a picture.
Yeah.
And we have to say, I'm sorry, no cell phones allowed.
Yeah.
And we say, you can have them at the door with the machines in the background, but that's about it. And they're so excited about casting their first vote and having an opportunity.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to rob them of that.
Yeah.
And then I had a 96-year-old gentleman in my poll, always had his World War II cap on,
Mhm.
and have him come in, and he was on the Hornet. And so that was on there. He was on the USS Hornet. And what a joy that he knows what the cost of his vote was.
Yeah.
He knows some of his buddies didn't come home.
Yeah.
And he's still there walking in to cast his vote. He says, I'm walking in as long as I can.
Yeah.
And he's still coming in. And how can we betray, whether it's the youngest voter or the oldest voter?
Yeah.
And those in between, we have to manage a system. my neighbors next door are from South Africa. My husband's naturalized citizen. My son-in-law is naturalized. My neighbor across the street's from Germany. So we live in a community where a lot of people come here. And my South African friends, they say, Susie, is there any hope? Is there any hope? Are we going to have a safe system? This is why we left South Africa.
Yeah.
How do you say to people who've become your dear friends, I'm working on it?
Yeah.
I mean, what other kind of answer can you give them?
Well, it's a shame that everybody is split right now on this. And, when you talked about that person who we have to protect their vote, my first experience was a person going to vote for Bernie Sanders in 2016.
Oh, why?
To see them removed from the rolls, to be pushed into a provisional ballot that might not be counted. I felt that person. I still see his face in my sleep and say, yeah, we're going to try to get this right, because this, like what we said, this isn't about conservative, liberal, progressive, Tea Party, populist right, populist left. This is about the sacred act of voting and protecting people's will, their First Amendment rights. One person, one vote.
Well, the thing that aggravates me, I think more than anything, is when people say there was no fraud.
Yeah.
And yet those people have not looked at a single ballot.
Yeah.
They have not read a single affidavit.
Yeah.
They've just made their mind up. And
Yeah.
and obviously those people are on both sides.
Yeah.
So I'm not being critical of one side over the other.
Yeah.
That to me is egregious. Okay, show me why I didn't see what I saw.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to. And
Yeah.
then I'll admit I was wrong.
Yeah.
But those 107 ballots were such a slam dunk as to.
And that's a sample size. What could it be? It could be huge.
Do you remember me saying it only took 1.2 votes per precinct
Exactly.
to win a statewide election?
Yeah.
So if in that one precinct, I've got 107 of them, that's a little bit more than
1.2. That's we have to do something about our elections. And I'm glad you're out there fighting for it. I really do appreciate you. Thank you for coming and talking with us today.
It's been fun. Thank you.
Pleasure and stuff like that. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm going to read some super chats here. You can step on out real quick. Thank you so much. Thank you, Susie. That was Susie. You can go back and check the ladies' testimonies at the Georgia Senate hearing. Wow. I mean, and that's a person who's been doing it. Two people have been doing it for a long, long time. And I think the most thing eye-opening to me is the fact that the voting patterns, because for us, it's like Susie talked about the people who, there's no frauds. But if you understand the system, if you learn the system, even on the surface level, you would say, wow, there's something wrong with these elections. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Susie. You ladies have a wonderful day. I'm going to read this real quick and get through. Trey Wright, thank you so much for the Super Ray contribution. Climate Rebel says, good work, Pasta. It pains me that we don't need to take the risk any longer. Trusting corrupt politicians from privately funded political parties controlling public elections don't need to take the risk that they're almost absurdly de facto taking bribes, donor, meaning expecting nothing in return. That's not what's happening. They use technology to cheat us. We need to use technology to protect our elections. We do need to use technology to protect our elections. Jake Forever. Props to the Convo Couch for continuing to cover this. We will always cover this. Elections here, elections there. We're international now. We were in Peru. Fiorella is there. And thank you for the 112 people watching over the Salt Lakers. Rock Our Mom, War, Deer Entertainment. It's great to see you. Pasta, make sure you get yourself a chicken biscuit while you're down there. Hell, mail me one too. War Deer, I'm a vegan, so there'll be no chicken biscuit for me, but thank you so much. So that's it. Johnny, can you hear us on the other end over there?
Yeah, you hear me?
Can hear you loud and clear. You got anything to say before we get on out of here?
No, it was a great interview. It was, two amazing ladies, fighting for election integrity. Everybody stay tuned because Fiorella's on the ground. We're going to bring you a live feed outside of Lima, outside of Pedro Castillo's office.
Do we have any early results there yet?
It flipped, so Castillo's leading.
Nice. When is the last day are they expecting to get the full results in?
I'm not sure. the results are coming in. It's 94% processed, and 94% processed with Castillo leaving, 50.125% to Keiko's 49.875%.
So it's very, very close, very, very tight. Wow. Well, elections here, elections there, Johnny. Thank you so much for plugging us in. I got to say, I've been in Georgia here for the last couple of days. You guys have been doing amazing work there, Johnny. I think what you have been providing for Fiorella and what she's been providing on the ground is amazing. And I want to thank everybody out there who left us super raise, all our Patreons. As you know, YouTube still has us kneecapped, and we essentially they took away 1/3 of our salary, if not more, and that really sucks. So it really means a lot when you, ladies and gentlemen, chip on in and help us get where we got to go, Johnny. Do you have anything else for me, or do you want me to get on out of here?
No, that's it.
Yeah, I also want to say I did some amazing interviews. One of the most amazing interviews I had yesterday for the new show, To Hell and Back, about a story about addiction, a deeper dive into addiction. It's going to be on our Rokfin every Thursday, 6 p.m. on Pacific time. So if you want to learn more about this awful pandemic that's hitting us, 70,000 people died last year of opioid addictions, and it's only going to get worse. So we invite you to tune on in. I was in North Georgia getting some interviews, so I'll have some more stuff to share from my trip, Johnny.
Sounds good, brother.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for everybody. For Pasta Jardula, it's Convo out. You're going to stay live, Johnny? You're going to clip on out and clip back in?
Yeah, I'm going to shut down the live stream, and I'll have it back up.
All right, guys. We love you guys. Pay attention to what's going on with Fiorella and Johnny Sue on those 1s and 2s, everybody. Convo out.
Peace.